right. Hi, my name is Lisa Daniels from Excelsior College, which is in upstate New York. This is my colleague Glenn Braddock, and we wanted to share with you about how we have used analytics to change how we do things in terms of reaching out to our at-risk students. This is a bit of a shift from presentation you just listened to, if you can do a little mental shift from middle school students to adult students with an average age of 37. It's a very different population here that we're working with. So I wanted to tell you first a little bit about Excelsior College because it is very different and it drives both why we've built these models and how we've built them differently than you might see them at other institutions. Excelsior is an online distance education college. I say distance education because it was founded in 1971. Obviously, it was not online at that time. But the history of the college is serving adult students, serving them where they are, so at their home, at their place of work, and not on a physical campus. We have on any given day about 35,000 enrolled students. Students do enroll every day of the week. Except weekends and holidays, so they can enroll at any time, they can start at any time. So that's a little different too. We do have a term structure for our online courses, but otherwise it's very much a fluid in and out. They can graduate at any time, enroll, withdraw at any time. Most of our students are working, and the vast majority of them are working full-time, so this also impacts the rate at which they progress through the program. 45% of them are active military students or veterans. They've typically attended several different institutions, particularly our military students, for instance, may have been attending institutions near where they're, the base that they are on, and then they take a break because they're deployed or they come back. And we do have a liberal transfer credit acceptance policy to accommodate things like that, the military students and other adult students. Most of our students come to us having attended at least one, and often several different institutions. So it is kind of a high-risk population to begin with. They're coming to us to finish what they've started somewhere else rather than just starting on their college career. And we have online courses as well as more traditional credit by exam options and transfer credit coming in at any time. And in fact, one of our largest programs was until recently exclusively a credit by exam program. So when I talk about credits later, bear in mind that this is not just course credits. It can come from many different sources.
So prior to launching the Student Success Center, of course, we were concerned about student attrition and would launch various interventions to work with at-risk students. Those tended to meet with mixed results for various reasons. First of all, they were generally driven by professional judgment about which students needed support and when and how, and that judgment was very valuable, but it was often not based on the analysis of data. More problematic, I think, was that these interventions were very often sporadic and not well resourced. They tended to depend on giving extra work to our academic advisors to outreach to at-risk students. And the role of the academic advisor at Excelsior College is very complex. It requires evaluation of transfer credit and some very high volume on-demand advising. So that meant the at-risk interventions tended to not be prioritized the way they should have been or to be prioritized differently across the college. In thinking about resources and what kind of support we needed to provide to students, we had to ask ourselves if we were providing support that really matched well with the challenges that our adult students actually face. And when those students withdraw from the college or withdraw from courses, they tend to do so for not directly academic reasons, really for non-academic reasons. As Lisa pointed out, they're adults. They have many competing professional and personal responsibilities. Many are serving in the military. And so managing all of those commitments is often a reason why students leave the college or courses. Oftentimes they're facing some pretty severe financial challenges as well. So we determined that we wanted to offer our students success coaching to complement academic advising, as well as the support that our instructors provide to students. So success coaches will work with students on skills such as goal setting, time management, maintaining motivation for completing their degree, overcoming obstacles, and really the coaches is kind of coach would be a single point of contact so a student can have somebody to call to help them navigate the college and all of the resources that are available to them. In delivering success coaching, we decided to use predictive analytics because we needed this to be targeted and proactive outreach. Prior to the launch of the Student Success Center, we had a process whereby we'd reach out to students who had been inactive for more than 6 months. We still reach out to students when they go on academic probation. Those things are very valuable, but they're also, in a sense, too late. A student's already run into trouble when they're non-persistent or on academic probation. When we tried to reach those students earlier, we would often use a kind of a pilot approach where we would do a blanket outreach to newly enrolled students in particular programs. And the problem there was we just didn't have the impact we wanted to have because the outreach was not targeted sufficiently. So we knew we needed to reach the right students at the right time and with the right intervention, and we chose success coaching. One of the problems was we didn't have internal capacity or expertise in coaching, so we engaged with a vendor, Inside Track, and Inside Track trains our own internal success coaches, and they continue that training. They've also helped us to think about how we can use risk and engagement models to find the best students for us to direct our coaching resources to. So we use the risk and engagement models to focus on students who are high risk, so they need coaching, and they're also open to engagement, so they're very likely to engage with coaching. That's very important for us to manage our resources because we have 10 coaches, which is great. We were able to hire 10 new coaches, but there's 35,000 students, so we need to know where best to direct those services.
So a little about the models, just an overview of the models. I won't go into too much detail, but the engagement model was developed by Inside Track, our coaching partner. And again, that's focused really on just predicting the likelihood that the student will respond to the invitation to accept coaching. And then the other models, the attrition risk models, were developed in-house by our analytics staff. And rather than one model, we developed a set of 16 attrition risk models. And the reason we did that has to do with that continuous enrollment and that pattern that I mentioned earlier, and the way that the credit can come in at any time. So we have a model 0, which is right at enrollment when we know a fairly limited amount about a student, and then we have one after the end of the first month, the second month, the third month, all the way through the 16th model is at 15 months or more. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The reason that was selected is a very particular point where we see attrition in our institution based on our operational model. The desired outcome, what we were looking to model, was that students are engaged in credit activity 6 months from the future, whatever date that model was run. And this is because, a couple of reasons. One, because we see that as a big drop-off point, but also because sorry, completely lost my train of thought there. Because our students tend to take breaks. They are adults, as we've mentioned, and taking off a few months is not uncommon, and we want to encourage that if it works for their lifestyle, but once they take a break, it's hard to get back to, so we want to wait a little bit, but not too long. The models were constructed on a random forest methodology, and then the classifiers for those models create a risk score for each student that goes from 0 to 1. It's the probability that they will be still active in 6 months. And we do a daily update of the risk scores. We wanted a daily update for a few reasons. One is because, of course, a student could, we wouldn't do end of term because a student could take an exam in the middle of the term, a credit by exam, and then that would change potentially what their risk score is, depending on how well they did on the exam or whether they took one or not. We also didn't want to have a student sort of rising to the priority for a coach to outreach to them, only to have the coach find out, well, I just registered for courses yesterday, I'm fine, I'm on track, I'm doing well. And this has proven to be a lot harder to see up there than I anticipated, and I tried to make a very simplified version of this because I was not going to walk through 16 different models, but I did want to give you a sense of what's in some examples of what's in the models and how that changes over time, and why we wanted to run all these different models rather than one or two. And you can see up there, if you can read some of those, some of the factors, like at the early models, the farthest left column is early enrollment, so that's the 0, 1, and 2 month models, and this is just an aggregate across, an average importance of them. Not even mathematically, just eyeballing it. And then the middle column is the rest of that first year, so 3 to 12 months, and then the final right-hand column is in the second year and beyond. And I've highlighted in purple age at enrollment because you can see how that changes over time. Right at the beginning, that's a fairly high importance in the model. We do have a pretty robust, previous research, we've shown pretty robust effect, a negative correlation between age and retention. The older the student is, the more likely they are to leave the institution. And at the beginning, we don't know a whole lot about the student. We don't take any test scores, we don't do placement exams, so it really is just very basic information. Once you get in a couple of months and they've started taking some credit, you can see that other factors become more important. Their credit velocity, that's the pace at which they're taking credit. We find, kind of contrary to in a traditional institution, students who often will take full-time loads don't do very well at our institution because, again, they're also working full-time and they have family obligations often. So too high a credit velocity can be a problem. Also, you see, of course, things coming in, how many exam credits they've attempted, how many course credits, and you start to see that fiscal hold is the name of the variable in the model, but that if they're starting to have financial difficulties paying for things. And then you can see at the other end how then that comes even higher. If they're having trouble paying for their education, then that is a major sign of attrition. It also could be that they've decided to leave already and are just not paying their bill on the way out. But either way, it's one we know we want to reach out to.
So turning now to how we implement the models to help us manage our coaching rosters and to engage with students. So students' eligibility for coaching rosters and also their priority within them is determined by ranked risk and engagement. And so each coach has a roster which is divided into two tiers. The top tier, or highest priority tier, is the intensive tier. That is populated by students who are the highest risk and most likely to engage according to the models. That's really the group we're targeting for support, and we think we can have the biggest impact. So they receive personalized phone outreach and really high-level efforts to get the students to engage with coaching and to set up a series of coaching meetings and a relationship. Also on the roster is the base tier. Those students are lower risk, and so they receive a lower level of outreach. They receive emails and access to some important resources, including a mobile application, and they're made aware that intensive coaching is available. Students move on and off the rosters and between tiers for various reasons. One of them, of course, would be their risk scores. So if a student's in the base tier and they have a sudden increase in their risk score, that student would be moved from the base tier into the intensive for proactive outreach. Student engagement or lack of student engagement. Coaching is completely voluntary. It's not mandatory for students. So if a student is placed in an intensive tier of a coach and they try to contact the student and the student either ignores that outreach or declines coaching, they move off the roster and space is made for another student. On the other hand, if the student engages, how long they remain on the roster really depends on the decisions of the coach and the student. And that leads also to coach discretion. So students who are engaging with coaches, ultimately our goal is to have them graduate from coaching so that they get the support they need and then are able to be self-sufficient. That's a decision that is made together with the coach and the student. What I just provided you there is a very high-level overview of how we use the models to manage our rosters. Here's a diagram which I'm not going to go into in detail, both for time reasons and because I can't really see it, and you probably can't see the detail either, but we wanted to show it to you just to give you a sense of the flow there that is in place in the implementation. But just generally speaking, over on the left side of the screen, that blue rectangle indicates those students who, according to the models, are eligible for coaching. And then you see how it branches out into the intensive tier, which is on the top in the orangish color, and then the base tier on the bottom in green. And all of those lines you see are indications of why a student might move off of a roster completely or move between the tiers.
And so these are our most recent results. We were very, very excited to see these. Coaching began in December of 2015. So the first course term post that we could start taking a look was the summer term. So we've looked at our summer terms and the fall term, and I've put this up just for ease of reference. It's a larger term, and just because it's very clear and easy to go through. If you can see for all of the outcome variables that we looked at that we were hoping to impact by coaching, they were positively affected, and every single one of those is statistically significant, and I'm pretty impressed by the spread in some of these. You can see that the students who adopted coaching, again, all of these students were invited to adopt coaching, about 20%, a little less than 20% of them accepted that invitation and participated, but we've got, of those students who engaged in coaching, about 50% attempted credit in that next term compared to 36% of those who did not. You see a similar spread in completing the credit. They had higher rates of passing the courses that they attempted, C or better, lower rates of withdrawal, and then also credit ratio, which also includes any other credit, so exam credit as well. Credit ratio is defined as the credits earned over credits attempted, so a 1 is passing all courses, a 0 is failing all courses. We have 88 credit ratio of 88 in the coaching group compared to 85 in the group that did not adopt coaching. And this is just the overall results, straight up results. We are aware, there's certainly a self-selection bias here because students can opt in. The leadership of the college decided not to do a pilot with a randomized control. This was something we wanted to make available to students. So we study this the best we can. We did do a propensity score matching procedure to mitigate for that self-selection bias. And I'm also very pleased to say that the results, even after matching, are of similar magnitude. Do we have time? Yes.
So some of the lessons we've learned through this project. First of all, as Lisa described earlier, multiple models should be considered because of the impact of predictors can change through the student enrollment cycle. That's certainly true in our non-traditional model, but probably worthy of consideration for any institution. This was a massive project and remains a massive project that requires close collaboration. Student Success Center obviously is working regularly with analytics, IT, academic advising, admissions, financial aid, and really that open communication has been very important. We mentioned earlier that we're working with a third-party vendor. We found that communication and data exchange with third-party vendors may take significantly more time and resources than expected. If there's one obstacle we've faced that has been a challenge to overcome, it's that we didn't quite budget for the amount of time and resources that would be required for that data exchange and communication. The other thing that you might want to keep in mind is your resources and your student populations before committing to an initiative of this magnitude. For Excelsior, we have 35,000 students. They have many risk factors. We have limited resources, and for that reason, we thought it was essential to make use of all these tools.
So our next steps, one, we want to test the validity of the model performance against the actual outcomes. We have accuracy data based on, initially building the models where you have a training data set and a testing data set, and that accuracy is really quite good. But we want to see, does that hold up in real life? Do the risk scores actually predict attrition, at least in the students who did not adopt the coaching? Because, of course, we hope that for the students who did adopt the coaching, we're changing, by that very intervention, we're changing that outcome. We also intend to revise the predictive models as needed and refine them for changing circumstances. For instance, one of our largest programs has changed their admission requirements, and it's now yielding, we think, of a different demographic and a different profile of students. So we want to make sure that the models are still holding under that. There's a good chance that they are not, and we would need to change them a little bit. We also would like to incorporate additional data, particularly in the early models, because when our students are coming in, as I mentioned earlier, we don't know a whole lot about them. And particularly what we'd like to include is data from the new DAX assessment that we're developing. We have a grant from the U.S. Federal Department of Education to develop this tool. It's called the Diagnostic Assessment and Achievement of College Skills. It is not a placement test. It is an assessment that students take when they begin enrollment, but it does get at their math readiness, reading readiness, but also other things like self-regulated learning, whether they have math anxiety, forgetting something very, very important. But that, we think, having those scores will help us increase the accuracy of those initial models so that we can they are a little lower than the later models, as you might imagine, because they have less data. So, thank you.
enough time for questions?
Thank you very much. This is very good work, and it's very important to have the coaching area implemented with learning analytics. I was wondering, for you used the predictive model, and what is the accuracy or the performance of the predictive model, and more generally, so from practitioner's point of view, how good the model should be before you can implement it in the reality.
Mm-hmm. Just in an overall, there's 16 different models, so they range. Of course, every one of them has a different accuracy level, but just in terms of overall accuracy, again, then this is from testing and training, not in the real life outcomes, but they range from in the high 60s in terms of a percentage accuracy to above 90. Once we get a few months in, they are in the 90 range, and we felt pretty comfortable with that 90 range later to start this. And again, that's one of the immediate next steps, is to follow up and see just how tightly tied to the real life outcomes those predictions are.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, okay. So first off, I think this is a really cool talk, so thanks a lot. I'm sort of curious, so sort of echoing, there's a prediction being made about, how the student's going to do in 6 months' time, which seems like a great way to think about the problem. And then that's, if I've got it straight, the basis being used to make a decision about whether they're going to be offered coaching, right? I'm sort of curious, just intuitively, do you think that if you offered coaching to students that you predict are fine, do you see a similar effect? In other words, would it be a good idea if we had infinite resources to offer coaching to everybody?
Do you want to talk about that in terms of our...
Well, I'll say this. One of the reasons that I showed you this complicated diagram about, students going on and off rosters is because we had real concerns about, if we put every student on a roster and offered coaching to every student, we would just be overrun, and we wouldn't. And coaching is very high intensive. A coaching meeting lasts a half hour or more. What we found, though, is by putting students in that base tier, we're not getting a lot of reaching in for coaching. Students are aware, they're using the resources, but that's not really overrunning our coaches with work. So we do feel comfortable now, and we're going to be moving to a model where every student, when they enroll, is put on a coaching roster. And so I think we're going to start seeing, first of all, how much, now those students who are high risk are still going to be the ones who get the proactive outreach that we're really trying to encourage to adopt coaching. But I think we're going to start seeing participation across the student population now, and so we'll have a better sense of whether we're going to have the same kind of lift. I mean, intuitively, I feel like we're always going to have more of a lift from that high risk group, but we do feel like we have the resources and we can move towards promoting this for the whole student population.
And I also just wanted to mention, in an earlier iteration where we had tried, and not with our entire population, but just one particular degree program, and had offered it to everyone, and we did not see the best impact from that.
Again, thank you for the presentation. I think it was very interesting. I have a question. You were mentioning, from what I understand, you're basically predicting whether a student should receive coaching or not based on, let's say, some level of risk of attrition, if that's my understanding is correct. But, and you were referencing certain levels of accuracy. How imbalanced is your data set? In the sense, how many students do you have that require coaching and how many do not require coaching? Just because, I mean, if the data set is very imbalanced, perhaps using a metric of accuracy is not really reflecting how good the model actually is. So I wonder how the distribution of students that are at a threshold of attrition is in compared to those that do not.
Yeah, well, and that is a very complicated question. And it's also, when we started this, we started with, should we have a threshold? Because typically that's done. You select a threshold above which you would reach out to the students. And what we were trying to balance is to offer it to as many students as we have available. So yeah, the accuracy is is one part of the issue, and also because we chose not to have a threshold, there really isn't one where we can say this many students are at risk and this many are not. But the other piece is, the different kinds of accuracy are also important. For instance, our real concern is we're not concerned about offering it to students who don't need it. We want to make sure that we're hitting that we're predicting accurately those who do and reaching out to them. So it's that false, I'm going to mess it up without looking at a chart, but the false negative that's more important than the false positive. Don't think I got at your question, but.
No, okay. No, I just was wondering, because that's typically a problem that you have, is the data set is balanced, well, you can come up with a metric, but if not, things a little difficult to measure in a way.
Thank you very much. I have a question about the coaching. So how long or how much coaching is a student offered? Is it a one-off session, or does it continue through the length of their studies? And if it's a one-off session or a short coaching, have you seen any difference in the students sustaining their interest if the coaching came fairly early on in their studies?
How long the coaching goes on is entirely determined on an individualized basis. So there will be some students, of course, who just decline immediately. There will be some students who will have just one meeting, and then others who have been on rosters since this started in December of 2015. So and that's not necessarily encouraged, because it's meant to be something where ultimately we're building self-sufficiency and we're reaching more students. We have not yet looked at, so basically the results we were looking at are just students, did they adopt at all? And so a student who adopted at all and had at least one meeting would go into that adopter category. We have not yet, although we will be looking at results for how intense is the support, what's the dosage, are they having more meetings over a period of time. There's also different methods of communication, phone, email, text messaging, all of those things that we need to look at. But I don't think at this point we've looked into, I think to your question, about whether students are more likely to engage for a long period of time if they get it early on in their program. So those are all things we'll be looking at in the future.
Let's think